Hey guys, this is Mel, and I'm back to talk about the Winchesters, two episodes. That is episode 102, titled Teach Your Children Well, which premiered October 18th, 2022 on the CW, as well as episode 103, titled Your Lost Little Girl, which premiered October 25th, 2022 on the CW. I'm recording on October 30th. Sorry for the delay, but huge spoiler. If you haven't seen the two episodes already, please go do so first, and then come back and see what I have to say about the episodes. Also, just a huge spoiler in general for Supernatural, the main show that this is a spin-off prequel series for. Um, Tend to bring Supernatural up, always comparison, because as you know, Winchesters just follow the parents, John and Mary, of 17 from Supernatural. So just a huge spoiler alert there. Also, just an apology for the delay. I'm still trying to figure out when best to record, because I don't have the normal freedom of recording right after the show, and then deciding that maybe I might do two episodes each, depending on how my schedule looks. So that's why you get two in one today. But with that, it might be a little bit different of what I cover, but let's see how this goes. So let's start right into it. So timeline wise, I guess for this part, we'll talk about. Let's go one episode and then the other, up until we get to what actually my top faves between the two are, and then we'll go from there. So timeline wise, for episode 102, it says it takes place a couple weeks since 101. John kind of said this in Act 1 to Mary, saying that they've been striking out on their search, but Millie says in the episode that John has been gone for a week. Not sure if for her he's been gone like it's actually been a week since the events of the pilot, or it's just been 1 week since she's seen him during an off-screen type of a moment. Not quite sure. First scene of the episode, that is 102, it is the Topeka case, and this is where we see the first victim, Barry, being attacked by his father, which ends up turning out being a creature for the episode, which ends up being the Latunda from Colombia. And with the storylines for the episode, there's three different ones I picked up on. A storyline being time for a detour, B story being personal drama, C story being inner demons. So with the first storyline with time for a detour, this connects to the Topeka case. So after our hunters go to the Savannah Menelenders bunker location, filled with dead bodies, presumably zombies, I believe, they find their monster box trap thing being broken, and they have Samuel Campbell's clue, which leads them to Topeka for a missing kid named Barry. This leads the hunters to go to Topeka to try to find Samuel, while Ada Monroe returns to do her own research about the broken monster box, which kind of ties back into storyline 3. So we'll talk about that later. So during this case, we have Mary thinking that it's a mimic that they're dealing with, which has a weakness to copper, but Latika does more research and discovers that it's actually a Latunda, which is apparently a shape-shifting vine creature who targets disobedient children and shapeshifts it to the pair that they're disobedient against, and they have a vulnerability to its own magic focused more on the heart being its weak spot. So naturally, the John and Mary team up. John being the target of the creature, and then Mary's the one who ends up stabbing it in the heart with its own leg. Uh, John being the target just because he was kind of being disobedient to Millie while in the presence of the creature. So there's that. So the second storyline, which kind of leads into it, for personal drama, we get John and his mother Millie having this argument of like John going and hunting and Millie not wanting him to do so. So Millie ends up meeting Ada Monroe and learns about Henry planting this protective jasmine plant around the garage when Millie didn't know what it was or why it was there, but it just wouldn't die around the garage. So there's the Winchester's garage, that is. So that's something there. And during the whole events with the Latunda, John realizes that he wasn't mad at Millie, but he's more mad at his dad, Henry, for not being there, and he can't really take it on his dad if he's not there, so he ended up taking it out on his mom, which he apologizes to Millie about. On another personal drama note, we have some tension between Mary, Carlos, and Latika, definitely on the leadership styles that Mary's showing versus what Carlos and Latika prefer. And it seems like Mary is taking too much from her father's way of leadership, which leads to her dismissing Carlos and Latika's more input, so that eventually gets at least recognized. And she takes a step back and actually takes suggestions and orders from them instead of her always dishing it out. So that is something there. And then the third storyline, which we did touch on a little bit, but this has Ada Monroe tapping into her subconscious to learn more about what the demon who possessed her knew. And she does this weird little spell so that she can write down everything that she was able to access from her subconscious, trying to figure out how to fix the broken monster box, and to see why the demon was attacking. It seems she tells the other hunters that it's two demons specifically. Um, so while we believe that the one demon we are dealing with in the pilot episode was just the one demon, apparently it's two demons. There's the one demon who possessed Ada, and then there's the one demon that they encountered, uh, John's first demon that he encountered. So there's the one that they exorcised out of the body, and then the one that they trapped and killed in the monster box. So that's two. So there, yeah, there's that. The last scene of the episode, I will say, takes place in the woods, and it looks like there's this cloaked figure that goes to the Latunda's lair and gathers their soul. It's in like this pink floating globy type thing, and it looks like it's to be followed by these shadowy spider things. I'm meant to believe that they're the Akrita. They are the thing that attacked what we believe is Samuel Campbell. Um, in the first scene of the pilot episode. So we get a little bit of a creature overlook there. Death tally, something I forgot to do in the pilot episode, which I always did on Supernatural, was just the death tally. So apparently we get the 3 zombies that they found at the Savannah Menelener's bunker at the end of Act 1 being killed, as well as Lilitunda being killed at the end of Act 5. Surprisingly, no human that was like related to the case, so like Barry and Clyde, they were rescued, so that was something there, which we'll talk about later as well. Um, but yeah, so there's that. And then tidbit wise, we have Millie actually repairing Mary's car for her free of charge. She was actually told that it was Betty's car, or a friend's car, or a friend of Betty's car, and she still did it, thinking though that it was Mary. We did get the name Betty, so we're trying to figure out who that is in relation to John. We do find out in 103, so I will talk about that after. For Carlos, we find out that he's used to hunting solos. He's not really used to taking orders from Mary. He does make a lot of band references too, and to kind of put in like reference points and stuff for analogies, so that's something. We do find out that the Men of Letters clubhouse that they're using is actually the warehouse that John had the key for, and it has the secret underground portion, which kind of looks like a greenhouse where Ada tends to do all of her work. It seems that she was aware of this portion of the the clubhouse, but the others weren't. First, I thought it was a very different location to begin with, but apparently no, it was what they found in the pilot episode. So there's that. And then of course we get Dean's voiceover only being featured during the scene when they're at the Savannah Menelener's bunker location, and it doesn't appear anywhere else after that. I will do a new thing though. I don't know if it's something I'll always do, but it's just something I really take notice of. Is just because I wanted to see if there's any supernatural parallels, like Supernatural the show parallels to this, specifically episode 2. So what I found was that one, the fathers led them to the case in episode 2. So if you remember at the end of Supernatural episode 101, John left coordinates for Dean in his journal to find that led them to Blackwater Ridge, which ended up being the Wendigo case in episode 102. At the end of the Winchesters last 2 weeks ago, the gang ends up going to the Savannah coordinates, finding out that from Ada, that's where Samuel was headed next. And at the Savannah location, at the start of 102, that is when they find Samuel leaving behind the clue to go to the Topeka case to save Barry. So that's something there. Also, both fathers led them to the case, but they weren't actually in the city themselves that the case was in. So John was never at Blackwater Ridge in Supernatural, and Samuel, from what we know of, was never in Topeka to oversee the case with Barry. So that's something there I thought was very interesting. Also, another thing I thought interesting was just the 2 creatures itself that were featured in both episode 2s of their respective shows. So in Supernatural, we had episode 2 dealing with the Wendigo, and then in the Winchesters, the creature ended up being the Latunda. Found out that both of them had their territory mainly, or their hunting grounds mainly being in the woods. They both can mimic the human voice. The Tunda obviously taking on a human mimic form as well too, but they both, the Wendigo and the Tunda, can copy the human voice. They are both immune to man-made weapons, like guns have no effect on them. So for the Latunda, it had to be their own magic against them. That was that weakness. And then for the Wendigo, I remember Dean saying that the guns they had were useless against them because it had to be fire. They had to be killed with by fire. And then they both actually had a lair where they kept their victims alive for food. So both layers were also then located by our hunters following something. Dean left behind a trail of M&Ms that led back to where the Wendigo's lair was, and then which is what Sam followed, and then Carlos followed the trail of flowers, uh, or Carlos and Mary and Latika actually followed the trail of flowers that the Tunda left behind, which led straight to the lair where John was being held captive. Also, the thing was that the original victim that brought them to this case, so in this case, Barry for the Latunda, and then I think it was Tommy for Supernatural for the Wendigo, they were actually still alive by the time they rescued him. So, like, they were the first victims that brought them to the case, so they ended up living throughout the whole thing. So that was another parallel there as well, too. And another parallel, I think at least, is that in Supernatural, we know that the timeline between episodes 1 and episode 2 is about a week in between the two. We actually had a dated stamp and everything. I think for the Winchesters 101 and 102, I think it's still a week. I'm still not sure based off of how John and Mary perceive how long they've actually been away from each other, like how long he's been away from home, and like Mary, or not Mary, Millie worrying about that. But I think it's been a week. So if that's the case, then that is another parallel as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. Um, but now let's move on to episode 3. Deal with all those stuff again before we go into the nitty gritty of what I actually thought. But so episode 3, the timeline. I really can't tell. Maybe it's a week in between episode 1 and episode 2 and episode 3, but it's definitely enough time for the group to read over all of Samuel Campbell's journals. Again, we don't know how many journals he has or how much information is in them. Maybe they can read them in the day. Maybe they need a whole week to do it. I don't know. But that's my assumption. The first scene of the episode, though, is again the case of the week, and that is Mary's neighbor Carrie being taken by a creature that emerged from mysterious burlap sap that appeared after Carrie's long lost stuffed bunny appeared, which is kind of like its lure, I guess, or its bait. Ended up being the creature being a Bori Baba from North India, which we'll talk about after. Or I guess we'll talk about now because it's storyline. So I picked up on 3 different ones. A storyline being the missing children, B storyline being personal drama once again, C storyline being demonic partners, again, mostly specific with the Akrita. But, so the first storyline dealing with the missing children deals with the Bori Baba, using lost sentimental items to trap people in its sack world where it torments its victims before eating them alive. Apparently, trying to chop them up in that world does nothing. They can just regenerate. And they can really like climb on walls and like really do stuff. It reminded me of the Scarecrow actually. Like the way it looked, it reminded me of the Scarecrow on Supernatural episode 111. So it's just like with the whole like burlap sap, the threading and all that. Anyways, so when Carrie is taken and then her brother Ford is taken because he was trying to find Carrie, Mary ends up allowing herself to get trapped in that world so she can be like a defense for Carrie and Ford, and then getting John to try to figure out how to not only free them from that world, but how to kill the Bori Baba. And that leads him to rush over to Latika to find a way because Latika remembered the story from childhood about the Bori Baba and how possibly to kill it. Turns out that in order to free yourself from the inner sack world that they're being trapped in, they have to let go of the thing that trapped them there to begin with. So for Carrie, she had to get rid of the beloved stuffed animal, and then eventually for Mary, it was she thought it was her father's hat, but it ended up being that she had to let go of uh, apparently it was connected to her not knowing what it meant for life outside of being a hunter. So I guess that fear was what she had to let go of and actually take that first step of wondering what that would look like. Um, so, anyways, yeah, they do that. And then that forces the creature out into the human world where John was able to actually behead it and kill it with a regular knife from the looks of it. So that's how it ends there. Second storyline, though, with personal drama. Throughout all of it, we do see John running into Betty, who is now a cop. It also turns out that Betty is John's ex-girlfriend, who he had proposed to before he left to go fight in the Vietnam War. She still wants to be friends, though, but he admits that they were maybe a little too young to rush into getting married. So that is something interesting there. For Mary, we see her struggling with the idea of what comes after hunting, because she's leaving after she finds her father. So then once she finds her father, what does that look like for her when all she's ever known is hunting? So she's struggling with that and what that future would look like. which John tries to help her with. And then, of course, with Latika, we find that she struggles to reconnect at home as the Bori Baba is a childhood nightmare for her. We find out, or at least Mary tells John, that Latika's parents died years ago, but when Latika was on the phone calling a contact about the Bori Baba legend, she spoke to someone who speaks regularly to her mother. So either she lied about her parents being dead, or it could be someone else. Maybe, yeah, it's definitely a more complicated family history going on there, but it's definitely someone on the phone she calls mom and just wants them to know that she is safe and nothing else. So that's a little something there. Makes you wonder who she was specifically talking to, if it was an uncle, a brother, a friend of the mom. I don't know. So that's something there. Then we go into demonic partners. So this focuses on Carlos and Ada Monroe. So Carlos ends up going with Ada Monroe as she finds a lead on where the second demon could be located. This is the demon who was partnered with the demon who possessed her. They end up finding him at a motel, and after they question the demon, she forces him to possess a bonsai tree because apparently a demon could possess any living object. It doesn't have to be a human, an animal. It could be like a living plant. So that's something there. So they do find out from the interrogation though that the two demons, so the one who possessed Ada and the one they just trapped, they made a deal with the Akrita to retrieve the monster trap box for their survival against the Akrita killing everybody on Earth. And apparently the Akrita taking a page of the demon playbook, and their leader is hiding in a woman on Earth. And apparently the monster trap box isn't enough to stop all of the Akrita, as there's so many of them, but I guess it's enough to stop the leader, or at least capture the leader. Which gives me Leviathan vibes. So we'll go back there. Let me actually write that down here. All right, just so I don't forget. Okay, so there is that. Now the last thing the episode shows the Akrita spider thingy returning after retrieving the burnt piece of the Bori Baba and taking it to their leader, who we find out, or I guess it's implied that it's a DJ named Rockin' Roxy, a redhead, and she collects the soul again from the Bori Baba. Um, so yeah, first I thought it was Rowena, but then it's like, why does she look familiar if it's not Rowena from Supernatural? And apparently she was uh, Pamela or Poison Ivy on Batwoman. So maybe that's why. Maybe I just have to see her instead of just that one shot of her full face in view. So we'll see. But the death tally, again, this is something, the Bori Baba is actually the only thing that was killed in this episode, which I actually find kind of weird that so far in the Winchesters there hasn't actually been any human deaths, whereas in Supernatural there's always the one that either got killed or, okay, at least from how I remember early on in Supernatural, there's always that one case in the beginning who led to either the victim being kidnapped or the victim actually being killed, which brought the attention of Sam and Dean. And then in the episode, while they're on investigation, there's always another victim, and they're usually either taken or actually killed. And then that kind of escalates things further, them. And then usually, if it's a rescue mission, sometimes they're already killed as they're trying to be found, so not everybody is saved. But there's always at least like a few human casualties throughout the episode before they actually save the final person that was recently taken. And that's usually just about it. But so far in the Winchesters, there has been no human casualties. The only people, or the only things we've seen killed so far in the 3 episodes have been creatures. It was the demons being exorcised in episode 1. It was Latunda in episode 2, and it's now the Bori Baba in episode 3. And the humans that were taken in last episode, they were both rescued. The 2 children that were taken in this episode, they were both rescued. And then in the first episode, it was, I'm not counting the zombies that were found in the bunker because they were already killed outside of them even knowing. So, and I guess the human that was possessed by the demon in the pilot episode, would I count them? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, they were introduced as a demon to us first, so maybe not, right? So it's just like, I'm kind of surprised. So that's up there. But tidbit wise for episode 3 though is that we didn't see John's mom Millie. We do find out from the demon though that Ada dreams of being a witch. It's something that the demon taunted her for. We do find out that Mary's parents are separated before Samuel went missing. She doesn't know the reason why they separated. Apparently, her mom is mentioned at the beginning of Act 1 as being somewhere on a hunt in Minnesota, and Mary doesn't even think that her mom is aware that her father is missing. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. They don't name her mom though we do know in Supernatural that her name is Deanna, but also in Supernatural in 1973, both Samuel and Deanna Campbell were both were married, or at least living together, because that's how Dean met them in the past. So we'll talk about my theory later though about that. We also find out that Mary was trained to use the CB radio since she was 8 years old. And then again, we do get Dean's voiceover at the very beginning of Act 1 when they're going over the clubhouse. A desktop kind of expressing how, as a hunter, you need to follow your instincts and you need to have a group with you. You need to have a partner, someone to watch your back for that. So there's that. So now the supernatural parallels that I found for this episode, it wasn't very episode specific. Like, it wasn't like an episode 2 where it's like I was going 102 against 102. This one, it wasn't 103 versus 103. It was more of like Supernatural as a whole, which I found a little disappointing. But again, it was great to pick up those kind of parallels. So the first one being the whole older brother's responsibility for the younger sibling that we do get in the with Ford and his missing younger sister Carrie. This was very reminiscent of the specific Supernatural episode Something Wicked, episode 118, I believe, when they were dealing with the Striga, where it was an older brother wearing over as his younger brother was a victim, and then him offering himself to be a bait for the creature. Doesn't really help in this sense, but it was just that same vibe. And of course, with Sam and Dean, you always get that parallel. But of course, because we're doing with John and Mary, they don't have that sibling parallel to go off of, thankfully. Um, but that the dynamic we do get here does match with 118 specifically for Supernatural for me. The fact that we got the idea that the Akrita's leader is hiding in a human woman immediately had me thinking back on the fact that we did have. This is not the first time we had like female mother of monsters type of thing, in the sense that like in Supernatural season 6 we had Eve, the mother of all monsters, taking on a female human form. So now we're getting Roxy doing the same thing. Um, Also in the sense that tying off to it now, how I said about how it felt like the Leviathans. So if the monster box is the only thing meant to stop the Akrita's leader, then that's very reminiscent of what they had to deal with to stop the leader of the Leviathans in season 7 of Supernatural, where it was only one weapon, and if they killed the leader, then it seemed to like disintegrate, or at least deconstruct the rest of the Leviathan upholding. Although I don't think they all got destroyed in connection to the Leviathan, not like with one of the Vampire Diaries or the originals, where like if you kill one of the originals, the rest of their vampire bloodline gets destroyed or gets eliminated. So I don't think it's like that, but it just, when I was talking, it reminded me of that's kind of similar to the Leviathan structure as well too. So that's something there. And then of course, I don't know if this is a like a canon parallel or a fanon parallel, but the fact that we find out that John had proposed to Betty before he went into hunting, I technically before the show even started, and then Sam either planned to propose to Jessica or he was about to. I believe that was actually a canon fact, and of course before she died in the pilot episode. So that's something there to kind of be a parallel about how there was an engagement of sort. Playing. So that's something. Okay, so now let's talk about both episodes side by side as we go through the next few moments. So, for most shocking moment of the episode, for episode 102, I think I'd have to say the surprise for me is the fact that the creature, we saw confirmation of who the Latuna was at the end of Act 2. So, again, the show is a teaser in 5-act structure. So, I think I was surprised. So, that will leave end of Act 2 being like 20, 30 minutes in the episode. Um, it was just surprising to me because it just seemed like within that same act, because at the start of Act 2, that's when we had Mary suspecting Clyde as being the one who was attacking people, and then to find out at the end of that same act that he was a victim and not actually the creature. I thought that was very surprising, because that seemed very early for me to get that confirmation within the same act itself of who you suspected, and then you right before the commercial breaks, like, nope, that suspicion was wrong. You can throw it out the window. So I thought that was pretty fast. And then again, the fact that there was no human casualties at all at that point, I was kind of surprised by that too, because usually there's a bit more death involved in Supernatural. I thought it'd be the same thing for the Winchesters as well. For the third episode, though, I think the shocking thing for me is the fact that they actually revealed to the audience who the Akrita's leader is currently using as a vessel. I mean, yeah, it would have been something. I liked it that they said like they were hiding in a human female, like as in like a female vessel. But then at the same time, it's like I'm kind of surprised that they actually showed her face. I think I would have been fine if they just had it like we just heard her voice, like the little brief moment, like what we saw, like she was doing the radio station. But at the very end, when we saw her, like her face full on from the camera, I was very surprised that this early on we got that. Because I think even with like Supernatural, the big bad of season one was first off Meg, and then it led into Azazel. But we didn't know. I mean, it took until episode what 11 before Meg was introduced. Yeah, episode 11 was when Meg was introduced, and then at the by the end of that episode, we found out something was wrong with her. We knew she was a demon, but we didn't know what the connection was. And then it was only later on, like 18, I think, episode 16, I believe, was when they found out further like how big player she was, and then later on the actual big bad of her father Azazel was coming into play. So like we had to really wait to find out who the big bad was, and here I'm kind of surprised that we already found out 3 episodes in. So that's something there. But let's move on to top favorite moments. So for episode 102, I have to say I'm really liking the dynamic. I mean, again, it was a week ago since I watched this episode, but I have it listed that I like the dynamic of John and Mary. It's very interesting to see how they play off of each other and what they actually try to talk about and what they're able to actually open up about between each other. Um, I will also say that I really enjoyed the moment that we got to see between Ada Monroe and Millie, especially when talking about Henry planting the protective jasmine all over the garage, and like that realization of like even though he left, he took his precautions to make sure his family was safe. So I thought that was very interesting. I thought it was really kind though that Ada just went out of her way to kind of give that bit of detail, so at least it's some kind of peace of mind maybe to Millie, because I think that was a turning point for her to know that maybe he didn't just leave to leave. So that was something. And the last favorite I did like of the episode was that Mary apologized to Carlos and Latika for her poor leadership skills. It was great to see that she understood where she was going wrong and how maybe the tactics of her father's leadership don't work for everybody, and maybe she just has to find her own way of doing things, being a leader. I mean, she still kind of just barks orders at people, but at the same time, it's like it's a slow learning curve. So I'm glad that the acknowledgement part is the first step of that. Now, for episode 3, though, a favorite, of course, John and Mary are going to be my favorite, but specifically the whole confessional aspect of it, where when he was talking to her over the radio, yeah, talking to her over the radio about like trying to help her figure out what it is that she needed to let go in order for her to escape the Bori Baba's lair. It was really interesting to see how they were able to approach that and their reactions to each other's what the words were saying of it. So it was very interesting. And then also earlier when they were looking into Carrie's bedroom and trying to find clues, there was a moment there where it's like there is flirting going on, and like maybe it's just again as Mary said, she doesn't know anything outside of hunting, so maybe she doesn't know how it is to date or to take notice of someone who's actually liking them. And then it's also just kind of yeah, which will also lead into my favorite of John and Latika, because they seem to be like really close as like best buds, because Latika was trying to set it up for like John, go ask Mary out to the movies during your break, and he tries and like he picks up on the hint, but then Mary at that point wasn't, she was all work and no play kind of a thing, and then Latika and John are just like struck out kind of a thing, and then it's just very interesting how like when Mary goes missing, John turns to Latika and says like I can't lose her, and like it doesn't make sense without Mary kind of thing, like really full on uh expressing it to her. So I feel like it's full on best bud moments kind of thing, which I'm totally here for. At the same time though, it kind of seems like it's very soon. Like again, if it is actually 2 weeks since they met each other, it's just like it's going a little too fast for me. But either it's going too fast for me, or I wish we could see more of what would have happened off screen that allowed them to have those close moments as friends on screen. Same with like John and Mary, right? We do see a lot of moments of them growing close together, but it's like I feel like there's a lot of things we're missing off screen that built up to the fact that John's already saying like it doesn't make sense without her. I can't lose Mary, kind of a thing. When he has a crush, but to that level already. Um, so yeah, for me, it's a tad bit moving too fast, but I do like how we are seeing a little bit more of that type of dynamic too. Just because also as John is a new guy and just met Latika, it's great to see that he recognized that her fears from the Bori Baba being her childhood nightmare, and how he's trying to be there for her, but also how he leans on her when he has no way to figure out how to find Mary, who he's like kind of frantic about finding. So it's a mix of things there, but I'm definitely liking that friendship. So let's move on to top peeve. So for 102, the peeve I had was the fact that I can't tell if it's actually been a couple weeks between episodes 1 and episode 2, or if it's only been 1 week. You know me, I really like to know about continuity and how much of like a time lapse is between episodes, to know like how much more time should have been happening between characters as well, because it's definitely different if you know episodes pick up right off from each other versus if you have an episode that has a span of a week's worth of events happening before you see these characters again, so you're kind of wondering what happened in that week. So it kind of bugs me that I can't tell if it's actually 1 week between 1 and 2 or if it's a couple weeks. It's John and Millie's contradicting statements of time there. But for 103, the peeve that I had was the fact that they revealed the face of the Lakrita leader's vessel. I think I would have preferred just hearing Roxy's voice and just knowing that it was a woman. And then just that way, whenever we see a new female character being introduced, I would then be suspicious of whether or not, like, is this her? Is this Lakrita? But in the exact same episode, you actually, I see that she's a redhead. I see her full face, knowing that this is the Lakrita leader. It seems a little premature for me, so I'm a little peeved that I've kind of been told in the same episode who the culprit is. You know, because at one point I did think that because they mentioned her mom and they mentioned that like, oh, it's a female vessel, I kind of thought like maybe it'd be kind of be interesting if the vessel ended up actually taking hold of Mary's mom, and then adds a little bit more of a dynamic of, well, maybe that's why Samuel ran off, because he's trying to find a way to save his wife or his ex-wife, and then that's gonna make it, and he wanted to keep Mary out of it because he didn't want it, in case if he did had to kill Mary's mom, he didn't want it Mary to be a part of that type of a situation or something. That would have been like very interesting, and just like that question of like, is it her mom, is it not? Because why would she mention her mom in this episode if it wasn't connected to the female vessel? But now that they showed Rock and Roxy, that's like not the case. So there's that. But let's move on to random questions very quickly. Let's go with my episode 2 questions first. So, what broke the monster box? I think I missed that. I don't know if it's because they killed the demon in the box and that's what broke it, or if something else had happened in the Savannah bunker that led to it being broken. Not quite sure. Um, is there certain creatures that can only have the box be used for, and that's what broke it? I don't know. Um, Another question is, in Supernatural, because this is the prequel series, in Supernatural, we do see John creating his own journal about all the hunts that he goes on. So I'm wondering if on the Winchesters we're going to see this John starting his own journal of case entries, and see it kind of become what we see so familiarly on Supernatural, with Sam and Dean always using John's journal. So that's something. And then I will always have the overall question as my last one being, is this set in the Supernatural timeline, or is this an alternate version of John and Mary that we are witnessing? At the end of episode 2, I'm still in the camp that it is an alternate John and Mary that we are dealing with. Let's go through my episode 3 questions before we figure out if that is still the case with that question. So, the first episode 3 question is, who did Mary go to the movies with at the end of the episode? She said she liked going to the movies alone, but then this stranger offers to buy her an extra ticket, and kind of looking similar in appearance to John, so it's like maybe Mary has a type. I also question whether or not this new guy is going to be an obstacle for John and Mary getting together. I don't know. I'm hoping he's not a bad guy, but it wouldn't put it past me that he is to like to target Mary. So there's that. New question though is, will we see more of Betty, and will John be caught in his lies with her, because he told her that he entered community college and that's how he knew Mary, because they were in a study group together. But with Betty being a cop, I feel like if more cases happen around Lawrence, Kansas, and maybe that's why we'll see Betty more. But I'm wondering, will she then be brought into the secret at some point? Will she cause a rift between John and Mary's potential romance? Not sure. But it was nice to see a little bit of a backstory and see that there was no grudge between John and Betty for how the things had left when he left for the war. So that's something. So again, back to my overall question. Is this the John and Mary from the supernatural timeline, or is this an alternate version of John and Mary? Again, I still think this is an alternate version of John and Mary, just from the fact that this version of Mary, her parents are separated, and she doesn't know why. And while I know on Supernatural, that was not the case. They were actually still together. They were still hunting, or at least they always returned home together. Like, they didn't go on their separate cases from the sounds of it. So that's something there. But again, when we saw them, it was 1973. We're in 1972 right now, from my understanding. So maybe a lot did happen. But I'm going off of that where it is completely separate, just from the fact that her parents are separated. So I will leave it at that. Let's move on to predictions. So at the moment right now, I haven't actually seen the promo. So I'm not going to talk about it, but you can pause it up screen to read what I did find, because it's going to be written on screen in the promo. Okay, you're good. So let's move on to the synopsis for 104, because it reads, first off, fighter's instinct. And it says, after the details of a veteran's death don't add up, Carlos brings everyone in to investigate, and he shares a detail about his past that makes John see him in a new light. Mary finds an unexpected ally who has been hot on the trail of this monster, and Latika tries to help Mary heal and find closure with someone she lost. Meanwhile, John's habit of running headfirst into danger leaves Millie worried for her son. Well, John running in head first into danger, I guess that's where Dean gets it from, right? So there's that. Latika helping Mary find closure in someone she's lost, that has to be connected to Maggie, losing Maggie, her cousin. Otherwise, I don't know who else most recently it would still affect her. Unless it's like Samuel in some way. I'm not quite sure, but that'll be interesting. Hopefully we'll get more of Carlos, because we didn't really get much of Carlos and Ada in episode 103. So hopefully with him bringing the new case on, it would definitely be something of a focus. I'm wondering if it's going to be like one of the traditionals, like salt and burn, like in your backyard, kind of a case, a ghost, or anything like that. Demon possessions are not supposed to be common back in the 70s. Since they would only come out when like big things are happening, from what Supernatural's told us. But or if this veteran case is going to be connected to the fact that wayward monsters are somehow showing up back home and causing a riot, instead of being in their own being where they are normally known to be shown, instead of traveling all the way. Kind of reminds me of season 6 too, right? Where season 6, all these monsters that weren't supposed to, or aren't normally located in certain places, were then showing up, and it's like, why is that all of a sudden? It seemed like they were all migrating to the mother of monsters. So I'm wondering if it's kind of similar to right now with these wayward monsters as well. So I guess we'll have to see about that though. But what do you guys think of the 2 episodes? What do you guys like about it? What do you think will happen next? What are you guys liking about the Winchesters in generals? I like the dynamic, but I like the dynamic. It's definitely different. I definitely like the reminiscent aspects of Supernatural, but I'm still waiting to find out if it actually is John and Mary from Supernatural, or if it's just a different version of them that we're seeing. But yeah, I'm hoping for familiar faces that we get to see as well too, as always. But I'm still excited, so I want to hear what you guys have to say about it in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and check my other videos if you haven't done so already. I'm probably going to do an episode every 2 weeks. Of course, the episode before the winter break is definitely probably going to get its own if I time it properly. But yeah, well, hope you guys tune back in to see what I have to say about the next 2 episodes. But until then, guys, this is Mel. Wish you all a great day, great week wherever you are. Because it's October 30th when I'm recording this, hope you guys have a safe Halloween. Take care. Bye for now.